Daniel Ricciardo hasn't started the season exactly how he wanted, and that's caught the attention of Helmut Marko, who sent a fierce warning to the Aussie driver. It seems like his journey to Red Bull has been further complicated by Perez's amazing results as the number 2 driver in the Austrian team, and with this in mind, could we see Ricciardo out of the Red Bull seat, given the fact that there are tons of young drivers that the team has in its academy to exercise? And more importantly, is Ricciardo out of his prime despite him feeling like he has it in him to drive in F1's top teams? Daniel Ricciardo has been heavily criticised by Helmut Marko recently, and that didn't go unnoticed by the media, especially after the scandal that's been shaking the F1 world to its core, which is the intra-team power shift in Red Bull. However, that's a topic for another video. Right now, we're going to talk about Ricciardo's own struggles in racing bulls and how Marko's statement may or may not have something to do with his internal beef with Christian Horner. The veteran Austrian hasn't shied away to send a fierce warning to Ricciardo for his performance, something that has been subpar to say the least. In Bahrain, Ricciardo was let go ahead of Tsunoda in a team order fashion that the Japanese driver didn't like, not only because it was in a fight outside of the points, but also because Ricciardo didn't prove to be faster than the Haas ahead of him. In the second race in Jeddah, the Aussie didn't show any particular speed and finished the race behind Tsunoda and only ahead of the pair of Kick Sauber drivers. For a driver who aspires to have the second seat next to Verstappen, that's definitely not going to go in Ricciardo's favour. And when talking about the situation in the team, Helmut Marko went on to say, "There is a lot at stake this season for both Yuki and Daniel. Yuki's qualifying was very good and Ricciardo has to come up with something soon. At least Tsunoda is very good in qualifying. Then they are in the points in the first stint only to fall behind afterwards. Whether they are putting too much strain on the tyres or there are other reasons, that is something they need to find out." The situation is quite serious because before the beginning of the season, the aspirations of the Racing Bulls were that they would be in the top midfield, fighting teams like McLaren and Aston Martin on a regular basis. Right now, this is nowhere near happening, and it does seem like the team is on a really rough path. And just like Marko said, there is a lot at stake for both drivers because this is the team that serves as a breeding ground for talents to join Red Bull further down in their career. Now, Ricciardo is anything but a young buck, and at the age of 34, he doesn't have all the time in the world ahead of him, and that's why he needs to pick up the tempo if he's to be considered as a legitimate candidate to replace Sergio Perez. However, the Mexican driver has done exactly what has been asked from him, finish second in the first 2 races in quite a dominant fashion compared to the third place driver. So if he does keep that momentum, Marko added that there's no reason as to why they would be parting ways from 2025 onwards. To add salt to the wound though, the spun that Ricciardo had at turn 1 right in front of Sergio Perez, who was about to lap him, has made the situation even more dramatic and troublesome for the veteran. So the question is, does he really deserve an F1 seat? And more importantly, is he preventing other young drivers from achieving their potential? We've seen with Liam Lawson last year that the drive to prove himself is immaculate, and that's not something Red Bull should be taking for granted. And although they are likely planning a seat for the Kiwi driver sometime soon, it might come sooner than expected. Another very important thing to mention here is that Ricciardo was specifically the choice of Christian Horner after his amazing tyre test in Silverstone, and all it took for him to replace De Vries was a phone call from Horner to Marko. On the contrary, the driver that he replaced, Nick De Vries, was appointed to this position thanks to Helmut Marko. So now there could easily be a conflict of interest in which Marko wants to prove his importance to Red Bull, using Ricciardo as a pawn in the wider game and promoting a driver from the youth academy that he is more or less scouting for the Austrian brand. He would have all the reasons to do this because it would be an indirect win against Christian Horner, who is now looking to enter a war with the Verstappen clan, one that has Helmut Marko on their side as well. On a positive note for Ricciardo, Perez isn't that sure that he wants to continue the collaboration with Red Bull from 2025 onwards, and when being asked about this, he went on to say, "I think it's really early to say that. I want to wait a few races to see how everything goes. It's obviously not easy or straightforward. The seat has some complications that we've seen in the past. We've seen great drivers. They don't even survive 6 months or a year, and they've been great drivers, but it's a unique team in that regard." Ricciardo's marketing value is great, and that has been one of the prime reasons why he has been brought back to the sport. Yes, his input in the car has made AlphaTauri quite competitive in 2023, jumping from P10 to P8 in the Constructors' Championship, although a huge thanks should go to Red Bull for offering great amounts of parts that are inside the allowed list from the FIA. Be that as it may, Racing Bulls hoped that Ricciardo would lead them in the back of the midfield, but as of now, it seems like he could be easily replaced and his F1 career could be good as gone, especially if you look at the performance of Ollie Bearman in Ferrari. The 18-year-old managed to qualify P11 and finish P7 in the race, keeping both Norris and McLaren in a car he got to know 1 hour before the qualifying session. And although it's technically the second fastest car on the grid, that doesn't make the result any less valuable. I think it was one of the most exciting debuts we've seen in ages. Helmut Marko has also opened up to talk about Bearman's amazing debut, saying that Ferrari are making a huge mistake by signing experienced drivers when they have such a solid foundation of young academy drivers that are looking to prove themselves further down the road. Adding to this, Marko went on to say, "To be on a track like Jeddah like that without much practice was really powerful. At times he drove almost at the same level as Charles Leclerc. But what is Ferrari doing? They are buying the expensive driver in Lewis Hamilton. Leclerc has a long-term contract, and now Bearman is showing off a super talent. If I were Fred Vasseur, I would immediately find Bearman a cockpit in another team. I don't know, at Haas, for example." Now, the Racing Bulls are in a difficult situation because not only did the team start off on the wrong foot, but they also have two drivers that went head-to-head with each other in the first race, increasing the tension when it comes to the second Red Bull seat. The pressure is even more increased when you think about the young drivers that are waiting for a shot in the sport. And apart from Liam Lawson, Bearman has also joined the chat of potentially having an F1 seat as early as next year. While it would be a kind of far-fetched scenario to assume that Ricciardo would be replaced by Bearman, given the fact that he is, after all, a Ferrari Academy driver and the Maranello team wouldn't let him go that easily, the policy of Haas in the past couple of years was strict: no rookie drivers. The American squad, however, has a new team principal in Io Komatsu, who went on to say that there are high chances that Bearman will drive for them in the foreseeable future. And now that both of his drivers are running out of contract in 2025, it's safe to assume that Bearman would be on the top of their list to replace either one of the veterans. However, if by some weird circumstances Ricciardo falls out of the team due to his lack of competitiveness, there could be some strange changes in Red Bull and Racing Bulls, and there is one very specific scenario that we must not forget. The Austrian team did not let Lawson join Williams from 2024 onwards due to the fact they had plans for him from 2025. With all this in mind, the situation for Ricciardo isn't brilliant because his ultimate goal is to join Red Bull, and so far that mission is not really going to plan. So whether or not he could prove the naysayers wrong, of course that's down to him and the fuel that's left inside of his racing soul. What do you think about Marko's statements towards Ricciardo's performance, or more precisely, the lack of it? Let us know what you think in the comments below.